I think what made the 70s so exciting is that they had a lot of characters. They had a lot of characters as racers. You know, each was like a flamboyant. Nobody cared about the type of motorcycle they ran because the majority of the racers rode a Jawa, so that didn't really matter. You know, in motocross, they say, do you ride a Kawasaki? Do you ride a Husqvarna? Do you ride a Yamaha? But in Speedway, there's none of that. It's the rider. It's the character, it's the uniform, it's the aura that they have. And you know, the Speedway riders in the 70s were all unique and exciting, you know, it made the sport good. But that wasn't the only reason why Speedway was so exciting. There was the racing, mud that went into the stands, lots of dirt, DG in that day. And then there was the chicks. There was the beautiful surfer chicks, and all the guys were following those chicks. They were hooting and they were hollering after a favorite girl. Could be a blonde, a brunette, redhead, it didn't matter. Lots of sexy surfer girls in the 70s. It was fun, and then who could forget the smell of the castor oil? The castor oil, the sweet smell, filling the air with the beautiful scent of that oil. It was so fantastic. But one of the great things about the 70s was not even a rider, was a spectator. He was a big dude, and he drank lots of beer. He used to sit in turn 1 at the Speedway track at the Costa Mesa, and he would yell, "More beer!" More beer! Yes, he would yell more beer. Many of you who was there in the 70s, you know who I'm talking about. And many of you who were not there in the 70s have no idea who I'm talking about. And that was Gene, the dancing machine. Now that name, Gene, the dancing machine, came from a 1970s comedy show called The Gong Show. And they used to have this character come in and dance like woohoo! And he was Gene, the dancing machine. And then when this big biker guy named Gene came to the Speedway, he automatically was named Gene, the dancing machine. And Gene was cool, and everybody loved Gene. He was probably one of the biggest spectacles, especially that wasn't a Speedway rider, at the Speedway venue. I mean, everyone had their eyes fixed on Gene. And when he yelled, "More beer!" It would get people excited. You know, he used to take his shoes off and race the track grader. He was having a race. He never raced the Speedway bike, but he raced that grading truck around the Speedway track bare feet. Bare feet. Probably with a cup of beer in his hand also. So it was quite the show, you know, it was unique. And those of you who were not there, and probably a lot of you weren't there, that this was just crazy. And Gene was just a big dude. He was a gnarly looking dude, and he was the sweetest, and still is. Hopefully he's still alive today. Gene has been alive since the past couple years, so hopefully he's still with us. But Gene was the nicest guy. He had a heart of gold, but he had an aura that attracted everyone. Gene had a magnetic personality, and his personality was amazing. And Gene, like I said, was the nicest guy. Sometimes he would climb up on the crash wall. He was probably half drunk, maybe 3/4. And he would walk on that wall, and he would walk, of course, with that beer. Walk. And then one time, like, he was so drunk, like, the wall, it probably looked like there was 3 or 4 of them. He put his foot down, and he slept. And then he fell, with his crotch hitting the crash wall.
Ouch!
And it was like a piece of wood, and it probably hurt, but he was a little drunk. And then he was yelling in soprano, "More beer!" in soprano after hitting his nuts on this crash wall. And everybody loved Gene. He was so cool. And Gene he's been a good guy in the sport of Speedway too. Like when some of the riders over at the Paris Speedway, more recently in the past 10 years, they needed help, or when like Steve Evans needed help for promotions and stuff, Gene, the dancing machine, has always been there, and he lent his 2 cents whenever he could to help promote Speedway. So Gene was a star in the early days in the 70s, and even up towards these modern era of Speedway. Gene, the dancing machine, has been a real positive influence and a great guy. And he's just a cherished person in the Speedway world. And everybody in the 70s, if they went to Speedway, they always remember him. He just had that electricity with him. Very few people in life have that. And Gene definitely had that. So today we're going to honor the great memory, and he's still alive, but it was still a memory in the 70s of that fantastic entertainer that promoted beer. And I'm sure he got a percentage of the beer at the concession stands, because the concession stands at Costa Mesa was lined up a mile long because Gene would yell, "More beer!" And people would run to that concession stand to do what? To buy more beer. And that was Gene, the dancing machine.